Hello there everyone, how you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today I'm here to read you some horror stories from r/no sleep. Whether you want to fall asleep to my voice or be entertained by the cosmic horrors that await, I hope you enjoy your stay here. Remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and let's get started, shall we? The end of things started with a leaf trapped in my son's eye, written by Rue Morgue. "Don't touch it," I said, "not with your bare hands." My wife Anya and I stood over our son in the living room, turning his face under the light. There was what appeared to be a sapling maple leaf in the outer corner of his left eye, one half of it folded over, trapped under the lid. How it had got there, no one knew. There were plenty of maple trees nearby, certainly, but how any of their leaves had worked itself so deeply in by accident, I couldn't say. There was, of course, the possibility that Luke had, for some idiotic reason, put it there himself. But he wasn't the sort of kid that did those kinds of things. He was a serious, quiet boy, 8 going on 80, as Anya and I have always said. Even now he stood patiently as we twisted his face one way and the other, arguing over whether we should see a doctor or if we could get the leaf out by ourselves. "What if it scratches his eye?" I said. "He'll go blind." "Don't say that," Anya scolded. "It's only at the edge. We can pull it and it will come out." She kept reaching for Luke as though to pluck the leaf between her finger and thumb, and each time I stopped her, dread washing over me at the thought of her skin coming into contact with it. I didn't know where that feeling came from or what it was exactly that I feared. Knowing didn't matter much to me though. When I had a hunch about something, I trusted it, and throughout my life I'd never been wrong. "Tweezers," I said. "I'll go get them, that'll do it." I retrieved them as quickly as I could, feeling I couldn't trust Anya not to catch hold of the leaf and attempt to work it out while I was gone. She was as stubborn in her way as I was, the majority of our disagreements revolving around which of us was right on a particular issue. That we had successfully raised a child together sometimes amazed me. When I returned with the tweezers, Anya put out her hand for them. "Now hold on," I said. "I have the steadier grip." Anya opened her mouth to argue, but Luke said abruptly, "I want Dad to do it." He spoke calmly, without any sign of hysterics, and even though this wasn't so far removed from his usual manner, I remember wanting to take a step back from him, even to turn and leave the room entirely. Only afterward did I realize that feeling came from him seeming to accept what was happening to him with the weary resignation of someone at the very end of their life. Holding the tweezers as delicately as I could, I took hold of the maple leaf, my other hand cupping the back of Luke's head and tilting it with a gentle caution towards the tool. Then I began to pull, watching the leaf emerge, damp and furled with the residue of tears. Only it didn't stop coming. There was a twig attached to the end of the leaf, and on, further vegetation dripping with moisture. Some of it was blood. Anya shrieked, but I couldn't seem to stop pulling, teasing out lengths and lengths of that delicate branch with a numb fascination. Luke didn't protest or show any kind of fear or pain, standing placidly and with complete trust in me as I continued reeling those leaves from the inside of his head. I couldn't understand how they had gotten there, imagining with an acute disgust of my son snapping off a young branch in the park and feeding it through his eye with a tranquil concentration. Still, I knew even then how it must have happened in reality, or some approximation of the cause. A seed or spore had gotten in somehow, and had, in the nutrient-rich warmth of the socket, begun to grow. I was vaguely aware of Anya moving frantically behind me, too hypnotized by the continuous strand of leaves to pay much attention to her. Then she was leaning over me, a pair of scissors in hand, cutting the twig as close to Luke's eye as she dared, so that way it fell away onto the carpet. I jumped back, appalled, not even wanting my clothes to chafe against it. "Luke," I said, "are you okay?" He blinked with difficulty, the cut stab of the twig catching his upper eyelid. "I'm okay," he said. "I can't really feel it, not that much anyway." I had wished he'd yell, cry, anything that would be normal for a child in his situation to do. But he was silent all the way to the hospital and throughout the various scans and tests that came after, as was my wife, who sat holding our son's hand, as though he'd vanish if she let go of him, even for a moment. She became restless each time they were separated, patrolling the waiting room until I took her by the shoulders and physically sat her down in one of the little plastic chairs. In the end, we were seen by a doctor in a private room, aware, even as we were ushered through the door, of the heaviness of that office. Luke sat in a corner with a crayon and notepad someone had given him, paying no notice to the conversation going on around him. Dr. Rylard kept glancing over at him, with an expression I found unreadable, and for that reason disconcerting. I immediately held suspicion that he was hiding something from us beyond Luke's prognosis. "So," said Anya, "the x-rays, the MRIs, whatever else you've been doing all this time, what's wrong with Luke?" Gathering us to a nearby wall, Dr. Rylard gestured to a set of images pinned against it. "You wanted to know how far the plant you had found had grown inside him," he said in a hushed undertone. "You thought he'd got a seed caught in his eye and all that started there?" "Well, didn't it?" I asked. "What do you mean by that?" But I could see copies of Luke's scans as clearly as anyone else in the room, saw the streaks of bone amidst gray pads of muscle and organs, and through them all was the structure of a web, the white shapes of many twigs and leaves. They were so prolific, the spread of them so profound that it was difficult to tell where they'd begun, the roots indistinguishable from the rest of the mass. I'd seen houses like that, so infested with ivy that brickwork loosened and came apart in its strangle. Looking at the images of my son's body, I understood that this is what was happening in front of us and had been happening for longer than we knew. "Is there nothing you can do about it?" I asked in a harsh whisper. "No extraction process, surgery or something?" Dr. Rylard shook his head. "There's no possibility of him surviving the removal. You can see how the plant's grown through his lungs, into his heart. There's already extensive damage. If we even begin to try, it'll only get worse." Anya ripped one of the pictures from the wall, her hand clenching so tightly that it crumpled at the edges. "So you're telling us that you won't do anything for our son?" she hissed. "You'll just let him die?" Dr. Rylard sighed and peered over at Luke again, who only doodled, oblivious to the whispered argument, or else ambivalent to it. "I am saying it's terminal, yes," he admitted. "We can look for options for palliative care today, or we can make another appointment, although I can't discuss other patients in any detail. What I can say is that surgery has been tried before in other cases. The survival rate is, well, low. Lower than low." "There's been other people here with this inside them," I asked. "What are you talking about? This is rare, surely." "I looked it up. It's supposed to be impossible." Dr. Rylard coughed and began shuffling documents, clearly hinting that our meeting was close to its end. "As I said, I can't discuss other patients with you." Anya put her hand out, blocking his way to the door. "Stop," she said. "You know something about this. What caused it? How did it happen?" Dr. Rylard's eyes flicked about in agitation. "I'm sorry, Miss Maxwell, but I really don't. I want to go home now," said Luke in a clear, decisive voice, and we all looked at him in amazed silence as though commanded by some greater authority. "It doesn't hurt or anything. It's really okay if we go." He crossed the room and took his mother's hand, something he hadn't done in some time. Anya softened, and I noticed her glancing up into the fluorescent lights to stop herself crying in front of him. "Okay, baby," she said gently. "We'll go home." I lingered, staring at Dr. Rylard until he took a worried step back from me. "Is it like that for others too?" I snapped once my wife and son had left the room. "The way Luke's acting, like this is all normal and absolutely fine." Something gave way in the doctor's professional resolve, and he shook his head. No, they're not all like that. Some of them get angry, and between you and me, that's a whole lot worse. In that moment, I hated him. Hated with all the impotent rage I couldn't direct at the tree that was killing my son. Yeah, I said, you're right. What's the point if there's nothing you can do? Anya and I walked, holding Luke's hand, across the hospital parking lot, the way we had always done before he had announced that he was too old to do it anymore. He looked at everything. Birds in the sky, cars in unique colors, stones on the ground, all with the same easy interest with which he'd always examined the world, unaffected by the twig that was already beginning to extend from his eye again. I wondered why it didn't hurt to have it go through him, and presumably feed on him. Perhaps some hormone had been released from the leaves to make him a more agreeable host. I had been thinking of it as a disease since the beginning, I realized, and likely infectious at that. I felt an impulse to ask Luke questions about it, wanting to know why he wasn't scared of death, but he seemed so small and innocent to me that I couldn't bring myself to do it. Torn up into pieces by my grief, I forced myself merely to walk with him, nodding at each comment he made as though it didn't kill me to hold it all together. A man approached us from our right, stumbling a little, homeless. I thought at first, or drunk. I felt sorry for him, struggling across the tarmac in the heat, likely with nowhere to go. Then, as he came closer, swiveling his head towards us, I saw there were rose thorns growing out of every facial orifice, petals dripping free of him like blood. He was stumbling because he was blind, and he had been abandoned in that parking lot by friends or family, likely terrified of him and with no idea of what else to do. Anya gave him a little scream of shock, but Luke only stood still, watching the stranger without visible fear or horror at his appearance. "Sir," I said, feeling I had to be some kind of normalcy to the situation. "Sir, let me help you." The man jumped slightly at the sound of my voice, apparently still able to hear at least in some capacity. He shuffled nearer, and I realized the danger of approaching him this way. "Some of them get angry," the doctor said after all. "Sir," I said again, this time with more caution. "I just want to help. My son's like you. He has your condition." The man nodded. I saw as he opened his mouth wider to speak that his tongue had been slit in two by the thorns. His words were a sort of mumbled gargle, improperly formed. "It'll happen to all of us," he told me. "It's catching, somehow. Anyone that's close gets it too. That's what they're saying out there." Anya tried pulling Luke away towards the car, signing for me to follow. To the old man I said, "Who's saying it? And out where?" But he only bumbled hopelessly on towards that hospital entrance, and I let him go, feeling pity that he was only going to be turned out to the street again to die. We tried to keep Luke comfortable at home in the weeks after that, which was simple enough, being that he would sit watching cartoons or reading comic books without a care for the growths that we had to cut back from his face day by day. One night, as Anya and I were putting him to bed, Luke asked, "When I'm a tree, will you plant me outside in the yard, so I could still be here with you?" I knelt beside him, avoiding looking at the maple leaf I could see flattened to the inside of his mouth. "You're not going to be a tree, buddy," I said. "We're not going to let that happen, all right?" Luke looked at me sadly. "I know you can't fix me, Dad." "Honey, come here a sec," said Anya, and she tugged at my arm, attempting to draw me away. "I'm not going to let anything hurt you, Lukey," I insisted. "I won't." Anya ushered me to the door and then went to kiss Luke on the forehead. "Good night, baby," she said. "Don't worry about this anymore." Once we were back downstairs, she punched my shoulder lightly. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" I protested. "I mean it. You know the doctor was right. You've seen how things are going, and even though we can't hide it from him like Luke sees it too." By then, we'd learned what the man in the parking lot had been talking about from online platforms and televised news. We'd become media addicts, unable to keep ourselves from watching update after update, dissecting each new theory before cycling back to the old again, in a compulsive and fascinated dread. It began with country people, farmers and orchard workers, anyone that worked closely with plants, particularly trees, and came into contact with them daily. The friends and relatives that had survived them all supported their loved ones coming home with injuries like lukes from which leaves, thorns, or parts of flower heads began protruding from cuts or bodily apertures. Attempts had been made to cut the growing plants or amputate infested limbs to kill the infection, but the trees were stubborn and deeply grew hardily in the flower beds of flesh. All of these early victims had died in one way or another. Some in the late stages of their growths had gone out to the places of work and stood amongst the trees and flowers there, succumbing willingly to the takeover in belief that they weren't merely dying but becoming something else, which to them wasn't such a terrible thing. Afterwards, government agents had come by and taken them away to be studied, which had resulted in outcry amongst the relatives until the phenomenon had become so widely spread that it was obviously necessary. Others amongst the first of wood, as those affected became rapidly known, did not die quietly. They became enraged by their oncoming ends, vandalizing the fields and groves they saw as responsible for their condition before killing themselves, often via immolation, so they took the invading lives inside their body with them. It would never be known how wood spread, whether by touch or if spores lying dormant in the bodies, if their hosts had simply activated in sympathy with those around them. Whatever the case, the areas where these initial instances of infections began were closed off from outsiders. The plants on those properties contained or safely discarded. But this didn't stop the phenomenon creeping into villages, towns, and cities where trees and other plant life were scarce. Scientists were consulted on the epidemic, invited to share their hypotheses or talk shows and news channels. There was no agreed explanation among them. Some believed that certain plants had communicated via chemical signals and fungal systems in order to develop a form of attack against the destructive human race, whereas others believed what they were witnessing was the rise of a new parasitic life form, able to take on various physical characteristics. One scientist, an outlier quickly shunned by her colleagues, claimed that the subjects that resigned themselves to their changes had been correct in what they were experiencing was a rapid stage of human evolution. Notice that it always starts from within and grows outward, she says. The plants even resemble the person they came from in small ways. I don't think we should be destroying these people. And that's what they still are, but honoring what nature has decided they become. This did not go down well amongst viewers, provoking a fresh surge of violence in response. Anya held my hand as we watched crowds set fire to forests across our television screens, some of them still partially human and screaming out to be saved. Journalists milled around with microphones, accosting masked arsonists for commentary. We need trees for fuel to build things, and most importantly, oxygen. Is burning them all the wisest course of action? A young man in navy balaclava shrugged his shoulders. It's them or us, isn't it? Well, it's both of us with this approach, said the journalist, adjusting his glasses and blinking against the sweat falling behind them. Without trees, we're taking ecological devastation, climate change. But the young one was already wandering away through the smoke, disinterested in the conversation. As the weeks passed and our fear mounted, another group arose amidst the haze. These people claimed to have developed a chemical that could be injected, bathed in, or ingested, destroying the infecting plant while leaving the host alive. Many dismissed the notion, claiming it was snake oil or being sold on the streets as a dangerous drug that would maim or kill anyone that used it. Many turned to it anyway. They were all going to die, after all, whether they touched the chemical or not. There were attempts to criminalize its sale and manufacture, but with anyone able to afford seeking refuge in the bunkers and other quarantine spaces, and vigilantes rounding up the wood to burn, there was no regulating anything anymore. Anya and I attempted to maintain some semblance of ordinary routine around the house. It was all that kept us stable, tricking ourselves into skirting the edge of breakdown, rather than tipping headfirst into it as so many others had done. We tried to keep Luke from learning of any of what was going outside in the world, switching off our shows or locking our phones when he entered a room. Yet sometimes in the night I'd slip downstairs to find him camped out in front of the TV, watching whatever news channel he could find, and idly picking at the maple leaf that had begun its sneaking progress out of its eye again. One morning I found he wasn't in his bed, and after looking all over the house, I admitted to Aya that he was no longer indoors. "Where would he go?" asked Anya, the shake in her voice breaking every word into 2 syllables. "Where is he?" But her gaze, like mine, had already fallen on the back door which stood open in the yard. We went to it side by side, not wanting to see what we knew from 1,000 similar televised images would be there. Anya let out a sound, not a scream, which would have been better. Less awful than the sound that seemed to come from her very gut, thick and deep. I staggered out into the yard, driven as people are sometimes to be, close to terrible things and prove they are real. Luke, or what Luke was now, knelt on the lawn, his little body held upright by the tree that had grown up through his throat, his spine the staff that allowed its progression through the sun. His arms swung useless at his sides, and his eyes... I couldn't stand to look at his eyes. I saw them without seeing intentionally, blurring my focus to avoid taking them in. While Anya stood crying against the back door, I walked with a dull sense of purpose over to the shed and came out wearing a pair of thick gardening gloves, a spade clenched under one arm. As I advanced towards what was left of my son, Anya called out to me. "What are you doing?" "Burying him," I said flatly. "The funeral homes won't take him, and sooner or later the government will send people by to pick him up for whatever it is they're doing with the bodies, or the vigilantes will come knocking. This is a better way." I closed my fists over the handle of the spade, tried to think of Luke's body as a doll, or as a scarecrow, some other inanimate thing. That's something only looked at. "Alex," said Anya, "don't. Please just leave him. Leave him. This is what he wanted." "It is what the thing wanted," I snapped at her. "That thing was through his brain, wanted him to die out there. Don't you see that?" Anya watched me, pleading with silent tears in her eyes, and in the end I didn't touch him, not because of her, but because the thought of doing so sickened me. We left Luke there for weeks to slowly decompose, and the tree spread its branches from him through the long afternoon as it had longed for. I kept the blinds down on that side of the house, and then, as suspected, that our neighbors did the same. Once in the following days, I peeked out to see Anya standing by the maple tree, talking to it the way she did to Luke, and I couldn't help but notice the way the leaves had grown over the skull looked like a face. A month later, Anya and I lay in bed holding each other, weary with grief and the uncertainty of everything, neither of us talking much, and there being nothing to say. Running my hand over her back, I felt something sharp under her right shoulder blade, and choked on a breath as it came loose in my fingertips. "What's wrong?" asked Anya, pulling back from me slightly to frown through the gloom. "Nothing," I said. "Cramp, that's all. I'd better get up and stretch it out." I went down to the kitchen. After shutting the door behind me, looked down at what I was holding. There was a maple leaf in my hand, the first sign of what was growing inside Anya, and now was surely in me as well. I leaned against the counter and cried like a little kid. Cried for the son I had lost, the wife I was losing, and for myself, dying without any idea of how much time I had left. Till then, I hadn't understood how those consumed by the plants didn't feel what was inside them, how they remained completely ignorant until they began to force their way, visibly under the skin. I had convinced myself that they must have known, only lied to themselves about the sensations and symptoms of having their bodies invaded. The functions of their organs slowed down, and even stopped entirely by the obstructing vegetation. Now I understood, for now I was aware of what was going through my body. I could feel it, the fullness of that new organism and its development through my muscles and into the chambers of my brain. I felt it becoming a new part of me, and I could see now how some of the infected succumbed to it, even imagined themselves becoming something new and good. Anya would be one of those people I knew. She had been changed since Luke had died, had given up on what was left of life, being that she had lost hers with him. Maybe when she felt the maple close in over her heart, she'd go out into the backyard and stand with him. Let the things that had killed them both grow together, long after even their bones were rocked down to dust. As I walked shakily back into the bedroom and lay down in the dark, I decided I wouldn't do the same. I had seen myself in the faces of the raging protesters in the news. I had already made myself familiar with it, with the local backstreet vendors of the chemicals they say can cure, even if I don't believe it. One day soon I'll inject myself and Anya with that product, and wait for it to work on the enemies inside us. And if it doesn't, God, I'm sorry for it. But I'll burn the maple in the yard that's still eating the scraps of my son, and then my wife and I. The world is ending in forest fires, but I'd rather go out that way, go out angry, still as a husband, still as a father, still as a man. I hope you all enjoyed the horror story I had reading for you today. If you enjoyed, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the story. I will see you all next time. Bye bye.